today we are talking about peer review and critique strategies. And my husband pointed out as I was making this, he happened to be in the room, and he said that, that looks like a tomato and a squash, which may not be anyone's real lunch, but I thought that was cute anyway, so I decided to keep it. All right, so here's what I do. I'm going to tell you what I do, and then I'm going to offer a variety of possible suggestions for ways that you can structure this particular activity, which is peer review and critique. So the first thing that I do is I share with them prior to class these two articles: How to Critique, Give Criticism, and Take Feedback. And it just gives a little bit of discussion about this and how to listen and ask questions. Be specific, don't be emotional. And then let's see, I gotta move my toolbar. Okay, and then the other one is Forget the Praise Sandwich, 5 better ways to give good feedback. Because the praise sandwich is something that's kind of been out there talking about different ways to fit things in. So this guides them as well. So prior to our first critique, they have read those. And then we also have, I'll show you on the next slide, a graphic that I use to give to them and guide them. But then I also mentioned, of course, consider the ideas, not the person. So that's what we're focusing on. And, it's definitely not the student. It is just really what you're seeing on the project or on the paper, whatever it is that you're reviewing. So this is that model, and it's by Emily Ray, and it's available on her website, which is www.risemodel.com. She actually has, this is for peer review, but she also has one for self-review. And it's really nice because we, obviously they read this or look at it, and then I go over it again, and we just talk about how you can start at this lower level and then move up, and then it gives some suggestions of what you can consider, and we discuss those and give examples. I asked them to give some examples of what that might look like. So this is all prep before our actual critique session. And then during class, so prior to actually beginning that first critique, this is what I have them look at. And then another of my strategies is using icons so they know where to look. So this is the Canvas icon, so they know that all of the content related to this is in their Canvas course. And so we just I ask these questions and ask them to contribute their thoughts, a couple of different students, and discuss what would be positive and what might assist them as they are developing their revisions, considering their revisions on this particular project. And of course, what so many of them forget is the rubric. The rubric is there, it's very detailed, and so I remind them that they could just use that to guide them as they are giving the critiques, and obviously just have the discussion. So this was the first one that we did just a couple of days ago, and we repeat this process actually in the course that I teach 4 total times. So of course, this is really good learning for them because they're going to be applying this 3 more times throughout the course. And what I do is I put them in groups, and within the groups, I actually have 4 to 5 students, and then I ask them to somehow split up among, at least 3 people, give feedback, and then get feedback from at least 3 people. And then again, I show them that, of course, we talk about that. And then this is a slide that I use with them. And so tell them to get some feedback and give some feedback. And that's the little Zoom icon that I use that tells them, okay, you're getting ready to go into your breakout rooms. So the way that I basically, I guess, organize this or implement it is that I use randomly assigned breakout rooms, and then they share their projects with each other. And I give them some tips. I have the file sharing turned on in chat, so they can actually share files with each other in chat once they're in their breakout rooms. But we also use Slack, and so tell them they can direct message each other in Slack, or they can use Google sharing to share with each other, so they can very quickly get their projects to one another. They can also share screens. So I had some students doing that as well. It just depends. It depends on the makeup of the group. I leave it pretty flexible to determine what works for them. And then what I do is I stop in each group and ask them some questions. I let them settle in though, because I don't want to be super intrusive. They're getting, might be newer that they're working with, different people than they have already been discussing items with before. So give them some time to settle in. And then I just basically pop around to the groups, ask them what they're seeing. If they have questions, what are they learning? They always have questions for the most part. A couple of times, they're like, oh, I think we're good. And then I'll give them a specific question from the rubric, like, are you looking for this? Or have you seen this? And I might also mention common mistakes I see are these, and then give them something to look at. And then after 45 minutes, I, just basically tell them, give them a warning or a little broadcast message that give them, a couple more minutes, and then we're going to be back to reconvene for a whole group. And then we do debriefing. So this is what the debriefing looks like. I ask them to consider the adjustments that they're going to make, ask a couple of students to share what they learned, and to consider if they're making their revisions based on what they saw from others or from the actual critique and feedback that others gave them. And then I ask them to create, I don't require them to, but I ask them to think about and create a plan for completing their projects. Actually set a date. Since the project is due the 23rd, what do they have in mind for getting these revisions done prior to that? And then they have to complete a reflection after the project is done. And part of the reflection is considering how the peer review and critique process helped them and what they gained from it. And so I tell them, write down a couple of notes now, because you will use that for your reflection, which is due about 5 days after the project. So some suggestions, the way that you can break this down a little bit. I have what I call extra flexible structure, flexible, guided, and then organized or fixed. So the extra flexible really, I think, would be more so for doc level courses, something that, master's level, maybe even ask them to identify group members, give them time to meet, but tell them they can meet however they would want. So it could be Zoom, it could be FaceTime, it could be something else. And then you really don't follow up or monitor, you just tell them to do that. The flexible structure, which is the one that I think that I use most often, is giving them course time, asking them in random groups, reviewing goals and objectives, and asking them to, adhere to some suggested practices. Monitor by checking in, asking questions, being available for helping them. So, oftentimes I'll have students ask me questions, like they'll let me know that they're in a group, that they need me. So I'll leave a group and go over to that group and answer questions. And then ask them to share what they learned. We have whole group discussion, and then direct them to, look at their revisions and make a plan. Guided structure, I consider that has guidance, monitoring, discussion, and evidence. So I would ask them to complete a rubric or a checklist or another document. So, that's maybe a different type of course. You want them to have something more solid, more proof, I guess, or evidence of the process. And then they have to turn in that evidence, so that checklist or that rubric, to receive credit for doing the peer review. And then, of course, they should share that evidence with the peer. Now, you can do this in Canvas. There are ways to do this in Canvas, but you can also use a Google Doc that can be shared with you and then the other peer, and so everybody can see that. And you can actually monitor that while they're working on it, of course, because you can ask them to be taking notes, completing the checklist or the document during the peer review. And if it's shared with you, you can just jump in there and see what's going on. And of course, that would be like walking around in the room and actually seeing what they're doing. And in this way, you can just do it digitally. An organized or fixed structure, that would be for assigned groups or pairs that have, some kind of reason to be put together. So you might do that because they have similar project topics. They might have similar needs based on what you've already viewed about their abilities. They might be at different levels of project completion. So in this regard, for our class, for EDT 180, and they're very open about it. They said, well, some of us had half of it done, because I don't collect the project for the peer review. I say, this is really for you. This is your opportunity to gain some feedback and learn from this. So if you don't come to the table with your project fully complete, or at least mostly complete, you're not going to get much from it. And they understand that. And they, of course, they'll write about that there in their reflections, which is what they usually do. But what I do is, I could pull them and say, okay, how many of you are done? How many of you are, halfway done? How many of you are completely done? And then assign groups based on that. So a lot of different ways that you could actually structure and assign if you wanted to. So you could still monitor their progress by checking on them, require that they actually complete some kind of document or checklist, and then a revision plan. So, all right, and this would be for a larger project, I would imagine, or a much larger outcome piece, like a signature assignment or something. They could have, what's your revision plan for actually adjusting and applying all of this peer revision and suggestion that you got from this person or these people in your groups? What can you do? And then, so that would be considered, I think, an organized or fixed structure.